Joining us now, House of Delegates member, Republican from Culpeper, Nick Freitas. He's also the Republican candidate for Congress, 7th District, running against Abigail Spanberger. Hey, Nick, great to have you.
Thanks for having me on, John.
Lots to talk about, Nick, short period of time, so let's get right to it. Number one, what did you think of the Republican National Convention Trump speech?
I thought it was actually done very well. I thought he did a good job. I thought the entire convention showed a huge contrast between both Republican philosophy, but also just the way that who we invited, I think, was important. You saw a lot of people that came from everyday life. You saw, I think, Maximo Alvarez's speech about fleeing Cuba, his father fleeing Spain, was incredible. Senator Tim Scott, and of course the president's speech as well. I thought it was really well done.
Are you comfortable running for Congress on Trump's second-term agenda?
Yes, I am. I think as you look through what he's talking about, whether it's a strong military, but also understanding that we're not the world's police force and bringing home troops home from Afghanistan, when it's things like criminal justice reform that is truly about criminal justice reform, but is not anti-police, that in fact supports our police, when it's tax cuts and making it easier to do business here in the United States by getting rid of onerous regulations, which prevent people from being able to be successful. And down the line, I think that is a successful agenda to run on, and I think we should be proud to run on that agenda.
Tell me about your campaign now and your ground game. How is that different from Spanberger's?
Well, I mean, we're obviously putting a lot of time and effort into making sure that we do door knocking. I mean, we're doing so in a way that's safe and we're respecting people's boundaries. But we think it's really important to be able to get out there and specifically talk to voters, answer their questions. I mean, there's only so much you can do on TV or in mail. That's usually the campaign sending a message out to everybody. Door knocking and other forms to be able to talk with voters on an individual level in a way that's safe and respectful of the various health conditions that we're dealing with, that allows voters to actually engage back into the conversation, and we're going to do a lot of that between now and November 3rd.
Nick, as you're knocking on doors, and I know you've been doing that, the Democrats aren't, what are people saying, Nick?
Well, I mean, I think people are frustrated by a couple of things. One, the response has been very, very good. People are very happy to talk about what is going on in the country as a whole. But there's obviously a lot of concern about what's going on in cities all across the United States right now. And while, there's plenty of people that demonstrate frustration with both parties at times, I think what they're looking at in places like Richmond and Portland and Seattle, that really has people concerned, and for good reason, because every single one of these places, the riots could have been put down. We could have had a situation where we respected peaceful protests while at the same time ensuring that rioters and looters, many of whom are from outside the areas that they're actually engaging in, were stopped, and Democrats refused to do so. And I think a lot of them take a look at that and recognize that not only are Democrats going to drastically raise taxes. I mean, Abigail Spanberger is supporting Joe Biden, who wants $1 trillion tax increase. Not only are they going to destroy our energy infrastructure with a Green New Deal plan, but they won't even do the basic things that the government is supposed to do, which is make sure that our communities are safe and secure. So I think people are concerned about that, and they're right to do so.
Nick Freitas with us, running for Congress from the 7th District in Virginia. That's the Central Virginia area that is right now represented by first-term, one-termer Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat. She beat Dave Bratt in 2018 in the midterms. So, Nick, let's get to some of the specifics here. We're still grappling in Congress over what to do with an additional coronavirus relief package. If you were in Congress now, do you favor doing something? Would you rather wait? What is your position?
I think that the president has actually been laying out a plan that is more focused on relief in the form of tax cuts, deferments, about allowing people to get out there and work. And I think that's the appropriate approach, because when the government's everybody wants to talk about the government spending more money on this or spending more on that. Look, if you don't allow people to work, you can't tax it if you don't let other people earn it. And my problem is we have way too many taxes in this country in the first place. And so rather than the government spending a bunch more money or printing a bunch more money and leading us into inflationary policy, I think the approach of cutting taxes, allowing people to keep more of what they earn, get back on their feet, pay their rent, pay their mortgage, that's the way to do it. If we're just sending out more money like this, that's going to cause some really big problems here in the not so distant future. So allowing the country to safely get back to work is the right answer.
Nick, are you in favor of the president's payroll tax holiday?
Yes, I am. And I know there's some people that are concerned with respect to the Social Security component of it, but I don't think this hurts Social Security. All we have to do is properly allocate our resources. So unfortunately, Democrats want to spend millions of dollars on things like political campaigns in the Kennedy Center, when in reality, we should be buttressing up and ensuring that those programs like Social Security are made safe while at the same time providing tax relief to American workers. We can do both of those things. It just means we have to reprioritize what we're spending our money on at this point. And my gosh, can we please get the Social Security fund back into a secured fund, get it out of the general fund so that politicians can't raid it whenever they have an inclination to do so. So I do support the payroll tax because providing relief there, because that's the one that I think is going to affect the most Americans right away.
You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network, trucking the truth across America. We're with Nick Freitas, running for Congress, 7th District, Virginia. Abigail Spanberger, the incumbent there. This is one of the hottest seats in America. It's, as I have said for some time, if Freitas wins the 7th District, Trump is going to get reelected as president. I think it has that many legs. I think it's a bellwether CD, no question about it. Right now, the polling that we have seen, Nick, shows this thing tied.
It's very close. I mean, we've always thought this race was going to be decided by a couple of points, but we're very happy with the trend that the 7th District is going right now. We still think it's a fundamentally Republican district. I think the polling represents that. And as we continue to get out there and execute our campaign plan and really talk to voters between now and November 3rd, we're confident that we stay in the lead. Obviously, Abigail Spanberger has raised a lot of money. Nancy Pelosi and others are pulling out all the stops to ensure that she tries to keep the seat. We've challenged her to 5 debates. To my knowledge, we haven't received any word yet, and I think it's been over a week now since we sent out that invitation to those debates. So we'll just see what happens. But either way, we're going to continue to work and talk with people through November 3rd.
So we haven't gotten anything from her on debates. You proposed 5 debates with the Spanberger campaign and crickets.
Yes, so I want to say it was not last Thursday, but Thursday before that. So it's been over a week now where we proposed 5 debates. We were very open if they had different suggestions or different topics they wanted to cover. We just wanted to open the dialogue to have a conversation about how many and what they would look like and where they would be held. I think it's really important at this point where if you have a debate at a physical location, obviously not as many people can be there in person, usually because of health standards. And so we think having more debates is a good idea. That way you can actually open it up to more people throughout the 7th District. But again, it's hard to plan a debate with somebody when they're not even responding to your request.
All right, you got a text here from Wesley. He says, I want to send Nick Freitas' campaign $50. Where do I send it?
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that a great deal. If you go to nickforva.com, that's nickforva.com. That gives you all the information. Or if you want to pay it online and that's easier, you can do that. Or it also gives a P.O. box where you can mail a check as well. And once again, thank you very much.
Over the weekend, I think it was on Saturday, the DNI, led by former Congressman John Ratcliffe from Texas, said they're going to stop giving in-person briefings on foreign interference in our elections and instead just give a written report. Pelosi, Adam Schiff, they all went crazy over it over the weekend, saying that we were going to get more interference by Russia and others, and that the Trump administration didn't want people to see what was going on. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think the Trump campaign and the DOJ under Trump has been investigating foreign interference into our election. I think the other thing that we also have to recognize here is that foreign intervention into our elections is nothing new. This has happened for as long as we've been having elections, and Democrats only lately seem to become interested in it. But I think it's important that we do study it, understand the effects, understanding who is doing what, and whether or not this is foreign interference from, just various politically motivated groups, or whether it's coordinated by the government itself. And we saw President Obama tried to interfere in Israel's election with respect to trying to defeat Benjamin Netanyahu when he was in office. So it's about understanding the nature of the interference, the effect that it's having. And again, I think Democrats are going to have to decide, because when it comes to in-person meetings, they've largely frowned on them. The entire Democrat majority in the General Assembly has insisted that the General Assembly meet remotely because they say it's too dangerous to do in-person meetings. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, you can't have it both ways. Is it too dangerous to do this? If so, well, then you're going to get remote reports, or you're going to get written reports. And so I think they're going to have to make up their mind on what they want their narrative to be. But obviously, we should all be interested in preventing foreign intervention into our elections. And I think the administration is interested and is deploying the appropriate resources to make sure that they don't successfully interfere in our election.
John Fredericks, you're back to Nick Freitas, running for Congress, 7th District in Virginia. Very tough race against Abigail Spanberger, toss-up, about 65 days to go. Nick, let's get to these riots that are now turned violent all over the place. People being shot at in Los Angeles. One person dead in Portland, Oregon, a Trump supporter. Then obviously we have the incident with 2 innocent people shot in Wisconsin. One of them hurt badly, that by a 17-year-old minor child with a long gun. I mean, I want to know where his mom and dad were. How he got out there with a gun is beyond me. So I've been upset over that. But the Democrats doing nothing. I mean, they're just doubling down. And in fact, the other day, Kamala Harris was still defending the demonstrators. Look, I went through it in Washington. I told the story how I couldn't get out of there. If Ann was with me, I don't know what I would have been able to do in just returning from the White House. But we had a riot the other day in Washington, D.C. You saw that. You've got demonstrators saying they were going to assassinate police officers on tape, and nobody says anything about it. If you were in Congress right now, how would you be responding to all this, Nick?
Well, when you said are Democrats doing nothing, I would respond to that by saying that no, them doing nothing would actually be an improvement on what they're actually doing, which is giving tacit approval to violence and politically motivated violence, which is something that we're all supposed to be fighting against in this country. We believe in peaceful transitions of powers, peaceful protests. That's the way that we approach our government for redress of grievances. But unfortunately, when you have people like Barack Obama getting up there and saying that they're the best of us and not really distinguishing between those that are protesting and those that are rioting, that poses a real significant problem, not just for law enforcement, but for anybody that happens to be caught in the crossfire. And if you want a perfect example of this, look no farther than Senator Rand Paul and his wife Kelly, who in Washington, D.C. the other night, when they were leaving the convention, were accosted and threatened and really genuinely feared for their lives, because the mob that was there started screaming at them and pushing them and threatening them. And here was the most ironic part about all of that. Is I don't care who it was, that would have been completely inappropriate. But they were shouting out to Rand Paul to say Breonna Taylor's name. He's the one that's carrying the legislation at the federal level that bears her name with the permission of her family. They had no concept of who they were screaming this at because they didn't care. This is not about finding a solution for these paid rioters that are coming into these places. The riot for them is the solution. This is about tearing things down. And unfortunately, we have too many Democrats in power that cannot differentiate between a peaceful protester and a movement that is now being hijacked in order to achieve a purpose that has nothing to do with social justice or criminal justice reform. It has everything to do with attempting to tear down this country and tear down order in areas that, quite frankly, desperately need it. And so going forward in Congress, I think we have to look at 2 things. One, obviously, we have a federalist system for a reason. The federal government is there to do certain things. The state and local governments are there to do other things. And unfortunately, a lot of this problem falls within the purview of state and local governments. And we're seeing how those state and local governments are run. And if they're run by Democrats, they tend to allow rioting and looting to take place wholesale with very, very little police intervention. If it's happening in an area where there's actually more conservative, or maybe I should just say common sense, administration, you don't end up seeing the same level of violence because people come in and they actually stop it. It's not as if the states and the localities don't have the resources to put an end to this. They seem to almost be relishing the fact that their cities are on fire because they think it gives them political clout. And that is just morally reprehensible. And so at this point, there's going to be a time where at some point this reaches a stage of insurrection. And I don't want it to come to that. But we need these local Democrats and these Democrat governors to actually step up and recognize that they swore an oath, and a part of that oath is defending the liberties, the properties, and the lives of the citizens that they're supposed to be representing. So it's time for them to step up and do their job. Otherwise, people are going to see a real stark contrast between what happens with Democrat leadership in time of a crisis versus what happens with Republican leadership.
What's their objective here? What are the Democrats' objective in not calling out these looters?
I think in some cases you do have Democrats that recognize this is bad, but they're afraid to do it. I mean, Abigail Spanberger is a perfect example of this. She likes to call herself a moderate. She likes to advertise herself as being a reasonable person, but even she's terrified of calling out rioters and looters within these protests because she doesn't want to offend her left-wing base. Because the left-wing base has already made it very, very clear that if you do anything to support the police, if you do anything to call out rioting and looting, you are going to pay a price for that, and she can't afford that right now. And that's part of the problem. We have a Democratic Party that is in large cases, held hostage by this political philosophy, which is just dedicated to this idea that America is fundamentally a bad place. The 1619 Project lays it out. We're all racist. We're all bigots. We're all redeemably so. And the only thing that can make it better is if you tear down the system. We had a delegate in the General Assembly get up and give a speech talking about renovating a house and coming to the conclusion that when a house has been built on a fundamentally flawed foundation, sometimes it has to be torn down. And then you're surprised when left-wing rioters get out there and start burning things down when they feel like they have approval from their political leaders. That's the problem that we're in right now.
Who was that who said that on the floor?
Delegate Josh Cole.
Unbelievable. I didn't see that in any of the legacy fake news media. I guess they let that one go. But, this is the kind of thing that, it just stokes the anger of people. And, having witnessed this now in Richmond and Washington, D.C., two cities where I stay in all the time, I just can't believe that. I can't even believe my own eyes. If you would have told me that any of this would be happening in either of these cities 24 months ago, I'd have said you were crazy. That could never happen, but yet it is on a daily basis, and no one is stopping them. And I mean, at some point, the Democrats become complicit in this whole thing with the destruction and the looting and the rioting, and now people are dying on a daily basis, being shot. People are bringing guns to protect property. Now the other side has guns. Nick, come on, man. You bring guns into this tinderbox, and there's no police to be found. I told the story coming out of Washington, the RNC, the president's speech in the streets of D.C., trying to get home to my car. I mean, there was not a police officer to be found. Mobs were just moretting around, waiting to bash people, and there were no cops because they were told to stand down. And this is happening in city after city.
And let me ask you this question. Who wants to be a cop in a liberal city? Who wants to be a cop in a liberal city where you're going to get called to go do a dangerous job, and if you show up and you do that dangerous job, the first people that are going to come after you are going to be criminals. The they're going to come after you are going to be rioters. And the third people that are going to come after you are the politicians that wrote the laws that you were supposed to enforce.
Unbelievable. Nick, I got to go. What's your website, Nick?
Thanks, John. It's nick4va.com. That's Nick, Forva.com. Also follow us on Facebook. Thanks again, John.